In the late Victorian era, the picture postcard became a popular form of communication. At about the same time, experiments in moving pictures came to fruition as the Lumière Brothers gave the first public picture show on the big screen in Paris in December 1895. Suddenly it seemed the picture postcard could move. These Liverpool scenes, the earliest moving pictures of the city in existence, were taken 100 years ago in September 1897 by Lumière cameraman Alexandre Promio on a hand-turned camera. Lime Street. In the background, St. John's Church, later demolished, and now St. John's Gardens behind St. George's Hall. Church Street, taken from the pavement side horse tram stop by the church which was Liverpool's first cathedral. To the right, just outside the picture, was the Compton Hotel, now Marks and Spencer's. The horse trams went one way in the direction of the pier head and back along Dale Street. The horse was king. There was no motor traffic. In the distance, you can see Whitechapel Crossroads. Bunny's was on the corner on the right. We shall return to these two scenes later. We now move to the Liverpool Overhead Railway, which has been running for only a short time. We pass sailing ships and a few steamships as we travel past Sandon Dock and Clarence Dock. We arrive at Prince's Dock near the pier head. This was before the Liver buildings and other riverfront developments. We now pass George's Dock, the site of the Mersey Tunnels building, and this looks like the bottom end of James's Street. These buildings are recognizable today. The Albert Dock complex, built 50 years earlier for ships of sail. Today, we recognize the pump house and Granada TV news studios. The left side, with the tower, suffered bomb damage and the tower was not replaced. Now we see many a sailing ship with just the odd steamship. There is a mass of timber on the South Docks. On board ship, and we enter Clarence Dock as a solitary man at water level paints the bow of a ship while the ship makes steam. The River Mersey of 100 years ago, with sailing craft of the knobby shrimp boat type sail by. An early steam tug hauls a modern, for the time, screw-driven cargo ship with 3 masts towards the mouth of the Mersey. On the opposite bank, as we near the end of the shot, you can just glimpse St. Nicholas's Church. To close our sequence, let us look again at the 2 unique city centre scenes. Notice the Sunlight soap sign on the tram. Port Sunlight was only established 9 years earlier. The tram's destination is Exchange, where Queen Victoria's memorial is today. The baskets are probably being taken from the Compton Hotel. On the other side of the road, ladies are in long black dresses as the coach and horses go by. Look up to the first floor level, and some of the buildings are with us today. August 1907, and Liverpool commemorates 700 years from the granting of the Charter of King John. 2,000 school children present a stunning display. The display leader on the embankment at the rear shows the way. After the display, there follows a historical pageant covering progress from Viking days in AD 800 up to 1907. The Viking boat is mounted on a carriage representing the rolling waves of the ocean. It carries a striking figurehead of a sea dragon. King John's car is built in Norseman style with a canopy of white and gold on columns of green and white. The king is robed in crimson and gold. The Birkenhead Priory car, drawn by 6 mighty bullocks, is in white and gold. The priory was for decades the only building on the banks of the Mersey, being founded by the Benedictine monks in the 13th century, who established the ferry over the river. Eddystone Mill represents early days of trade and was based on a 14th century drawing. The Day of the Barons shows a gilded canopy in early English style, surmounted by a trophy of Liverpool Castle. The Tudor ship car is based on a ship of the period of the 16th century. The truck resembles the waves of the sea. The Rose Queen car is probably the most beautiful in the procession. The throne is a perfect bower of roses with a trellis-work canopy of trailing roses and garlands. The Rose Queen, Miss Olive Jaffe, is dressed in soft pink. Prince Rupert's car from the Civil War when he captured the castle. The dapple grey horses come from Liverpool Corporation's team. The slave trade car, with a canopy of gold and brown, represents a darker side of Liverpool's history. Reality is imparted by 6 Africans on each side of the car. Liverpool Triumphal, the grand car of Liverpool with the goddess of the city on top in robes of yellow. 4 figures below typify literature, science, art and music. Others represent trade and industry. There follows reenactment of historical scenes. King John grants the charter in 1207, "Henceforth and forever Liverpool shall be a free borough, and her ships sail to and fro freely upon all seas. In token whereof receive this charter, which you shall cherish in the days of your greatness, as ye receive it gladly in your lowliness." The Stanleys and Molyneux in dispute in the 15th century. The monks of the priory carry the bier of St. Richard Molyneux, after which friendship is restored in the presence of death. Midsummer Eve is celebrated before Queen Elizabeth. Morris dance, folly dance and hobby horses take part in combat and revelry. The finale, the golden car of Liverpool, takes centre court, surrounded by assembled figures of over 700 years. 1,500 people. They sang Land of Hope and Glory. (1913), 1 year before the First World War. Royalty visits Liverpool. King George V and Queen Mary were accompanied by the Prince of Wales. He would abdicate as king in 1937. Territorials and auxiliaries are reviewed on St. George's Hall Plateau. How many will return from a war only 1 year away? the old tournament hall in Edge Lane. Finally, a visit accompanied with Lord Derby's party to the Mauretania moored in mid-river. Before looking at the First World War, we take a look at an activity in central Liverpool in 1916. At 9 Coppers Hill was the Liverpool Invalid Children's Association Welfare Centre. Mothers and nurses bring children to the centre. The background is interesting, with trams in front of the Lewis's old building in the distance. On Wirral, they operated Leasoe Hospital for poorly children. A mother makes her way to the hospital. The first job is to wash the baby and settle her into a cot. One of the baby wards. The sun balcony. Fresh air and sun was always considered beneficial to health. Tommy wasting away on entering hospital. Tommy after recovery. Ada as she was, and now after recovery. On the crippled children's section, 80% are sent home cured. In the boys' ward, it is noise time. The girls are just above. Happy children. Members of the Liverpool Cotton Exchange help out at agricultural work on site, even in their best clothes. Finally, the staff. Many husbands and boyfriends would be away at the war, and some would not come back. Lord Kitchener and General Douglas Haig visited Liverpool in 1915, reviewing the troops before departure to Europe in the First World War. No one could foresee the tragic consequences for Europe of the assassination of the heir of the throne of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo, still one of today's trouble spots. Bosnia wanted independence, and the military consequence meant Germany sided with Austria. Russia and France sided with Bosnia. Britain entered to save Belgium from being overrun. Unique in Europe, the British Army were volunteers. Lord Kitchener, Minister for War, recruited volunteers with the King's shilling. One carrot was that workmates and friends could fight together, and the war would be a short one. The tragedy was friends, families, and workmates would also die together, as they did in their thousands. Families would lose all their sons. Groups of workmates would all perish. Probably 1 in 5 of these men would not return. We now take a look at the experiences of 2 Merseyside men.
During the army, or the territorial army, in 1940 in April, and we had to go to the barracks to have training how to ride horses and till we became efficient. On the 4th of August, the war was declared, and we were mobilised as a battery and brigade and went into barracks as an army unit. Kitchener's army was formed a long time after the war started. It became Kitchener's regular units, became in Liverpool itself, they fought in their own units and in their own sections.
I went to join the army in 1915, but I could not join the fighting forces on account of being underage. But having the first-class St. John's certificate, I was taken into the RAMC, and within a month I was on my way to the Dardanelles. Later we were moved right across Italy and France to prepare for the Battle of the Somme on July the 6th, 1916. We were one of the first field ambulances to follow the troops in the trenches, and the sights were really horrific. My experience was really a lucky one in a way, but a sad one in other respects. I was at the tail end of a stretcher, and one of my compatriots was helping me carrying. We had a wounded soldier from the West Yorkshire Regiment on the stretcher. A shell burst on the trench head. It killed my compatriot and also the man on the stretcher. It buried me, and all that happened was, after being extricated, I found that I had lost the use of my right ear. On the night of the start of the Battle of Somme, it was made worse by the fact that we had a torrential shower just before we went in, and that didn't improve the conditions at all. In many a time we were nearly up to our knees in mud trying to carry stretchers with wounded infantry or artillery on the stretchers.
The Somme. After 4 months of battle, there was stalemate and slaughter. Britain, 420,000 casualties, France, 200,000, Germany, 450,000.
After 20 months in the Egypt and France, I came home on leave, and it was suggested to me and recommended that I apply for a commission, which I did. And I think I am one of the few persons that was discharged from the RAMC on one day and gazetted into the King's Liverpool Regiment the next day. From there, of course, I went to France, seconded to the 9th King's Liverpool Territorials, and from then on we saw quite a lot of action.
1917, Ypres, 500,000 dead and wounded. 300,000 British, 200,000 Germans.
Well, we were held at Ypres for a while, and then the army on both right and left of us were waiting for a breakthrough to do away with the salient which we were in. And eventually we did clear the salient, and we had the Germans in the same position afterwards as what we were in the beginning. But the casualties were so great, and the devastation of the fire from the Germans, that there was hardly a place that was left. A big church there, St. Mary's, and a cloth hall, which was an international place, and all the other places around about were all brought down to rubble. I was riding along on a horse just outside Bouverie, and they started shelling, and I moved off a while, and then I dismounted, and just then I heard this one coming over, and the horse stood on my foot, and I couldn't move an inch, and the thing landed about 20, 30 yards away, and it didn't explode. It must have been a dud, otherwise it would have been bad news for me. The night before armistice was declared, there was a bit of a fracas in Nil, and being attached to the APM staff, I was on duty, and 2 Irish officers were arrested, and it was my duty on Armistice Day to be their guard, and which happened for 2 or 3 days. And what a day that was. Everybody else celebrating, but poor Joe guarding 2 unfortunate Irish officers.
Remembrance Day, 1985. Our veterans were there to remember their fallen friends and colleagues. The result of war, 1 million British dead and wounded, probably 1 in 5 young men of the population of the day. France, 1.5 million, Germany, 1.25 million, Russia, 3.25 million. Many women would be destined to remain widows or remain single. No wonder each year in November the fallen are still remembered. Passing New Brighton Tower, two other veterans of the war entered the Mersey. Wallasey ferry boats Iris and Daffodil provided vital aid in the blockade of the port of Zeebrugge to contain the German U-boat fleet within port. As a result, Iris and Daffodil became Royal Irish and Royal Daffodil. Why would this man, or any other man, want to dive off a moving overhead railway train? It couldn't have been good for his suit. "1920s style shop fitting by Matthews, who still do business in Dale Street. The old lamp looks like something from a Charlie Chaplin film. The shop has been let, so let work commence." Soon it is transformed into another branch of Burgess the chemist. From inside, it is interesting to look out on the street and see horse traffic and a smart car. Matthew's own shop in Manchester Street is refurbished by their own men. The firm was established in 1846, about the time Albert Dock and St George's Hall were built. Finally, the job is completed and there is a smart new frontage. Alexander Rose Day, remember it? It was named after Queen Alexandra, wife of Edward VII. It is annual charity collecting time as these fashionable ladies of the 20s descend on the city to collect money. Look also at the city backgrounds as the trams go by. happy man. St. Luke's Church at the top of Bold Street is the scene of a fashionable wedding. Again, study the fashions and backgrounds. St. Luke's would later be destroyed by bombing and remain an empty shell as a memorial to the Second World War blitz on the city. New Brighton Beach was Liverpool's playground. At the western end by Harrison Drive was a series of beach huts which were available for summer-long lettings. A day at the hut meant dressing up and putting on your very best togs. The beach itself was full of tents brought for the day. It wasn't easy or cheap to travel far for your holiday and days out. Your local area was where you spent a lot of your time. It seems fur coats are the order of the day rather than bathing costumes. And now for a visit to the famous Meccano factory in Binns Road. Meccano, Hornby trains and dinky toys were household names. Established in Binns Road by founder Frank Hornby in 1913, it employed 3,000 people at its peak. Hornby trains continued until 1965 when they were sold on. Dinky Toys and Meccano continued until closure in November 1979. Meccano is now made in France. During the war years, much was done on war work producing bomb release gear and various castings. The new machinery became useful after the war. In the early part of the century, young men were trained in farming and then sent out to the colonies and dominions to become part of the new nation's prosperity. Liverpool Education Committee had the Williamson Hostel for the boys' farming migration scheme. The train brings boys from other areas into Lime Street Station to join those in Liverpool as a start to immigration proceedings. A sad time as boys leave the hostel for the last time. The YMCA provides new clothing for the journey. Time for goodbyes. Those left behind would follow on a later day. They report to the YMCA Migration Bureau on the day of sailing. Instructions are given and the boys sign for their papers. These boys are off to Canada, and each one is given a £1 money order to be cashed on arrival. Those staying the night in Liverpool stay at the YMCA hostel in Mount Pleasant. Duchess of Bedford prepares to sail for Canada, the land of promise. Photos are taken and copies are sent to parents only if so desired. It is goodbye to friends and relatives. How many will see their parents again? For these boys, it is the leaving of Liverpool and a new life in Canada.